Today is Tuesday, July the 23rd. I hope you're having a great day and that you've been really wrestling through this question of what does Jesus say about religious duties, but specifically, we talked about on Sunday, really the motivation behind it, right? Why? Why are you doing the things you do? Is it for the attention of those around you or for the attention of God? To seek after his approval. Today we are challenged to read 1 Samuel chapter 13 and chapter 17. And to compare how did King Saul and King David differ in seeking the approval of people versus of God. Well, if you haven't had time, I would love to just kind of recap these stories with you. 1 Samuel is one of my favorite books to read, and so if you haven't done it yet, you should not only go read these chapters, I would highly recommend reading the whole book because there's some really cool compare and contrast things you can do. Just to help you understand what's going on, you have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. Those are all historical books of the people of God, what God did from creation to the founding of a nation. And in the middle of that is the book of Judges. And at the end of Judges, you see this cycle happen over and over again that the people of God disobey God. And then they cry out to God for deliverance. He delivers them, and they disobey. It's called a cycle oh my goodness, I lost the word for it. The cycle of apostasy. They're going around over and over again, basically saying, we love you, God. We don't need you, God. We do need you, God. We love you, God, over and over again. And the book of Judges ends that the people of Israel did exactly what they wanted to do in their own sight. They did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and Israel had no king. Why is that important? Because of 1 Samuel. Israel had no king, and they complained to God. They said, God, we want a king. We want to look like the people around us. And they complained because their motivation was not, God, you're a king. God, you're a protector, but we want to look like everyone else. And they find this guy named Saul that they decide to be the king based off of two reasons. One, he was a head and shoulder taller than the average Israelite. And two, he looked good. That was it. The only requirements for him to be king was you're taller than the rest of us and you look good. I don't know about you, but I know if I was wanting a king, I want someone with a little better traits than just being tall and good looking. They didn't look after him to see if he had a heart after God's, but God tried to work with him through the prophet Samuel. And then you get reading chapter 13 of 1 Samuel. Basically what happens is Samuel, the prophet, says, wait for me to meet you before you go to battle, and we'll make a sacrifice together on God's behalf, and you can go to battle. Well, Saul gets about 7 days into waiting and decides that Samuel forgot all about his deal. And instead of waiting on Samuel like Samuel told him to do, he got nervous because people were getting upset they hadn't made the sacrifice, and they were nervous that God may be abandoned them, so they ran off. And he said, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll make the sacrifice, which was not his place to do. It was Samuel's. God was very picky about that. And so he makes the sacrifice, and Samuel shows up, and he says, what did you do? He's like, well, you didn't come in time, and the people were leaving me. And he starts pointing fingers because basically when it got down to it, Saul was afraid of the people. He was worried about losing their support. He was worried about losing their, man, Saul is so beautiful, attention. Instead of focusing his attention on God. And God gets really angry about this and says, I'm not going to bless you anymore. I've tried really hard working with you, but you just consistently choose people over me. And I'm going to find a king after my own heart. Well, you read over the next couple chapters, what happens is he finds this boy named David, who is the youngest of his family. He was a shepherd boy. And he was the son of a guy named Jesse. And Jesse brought all his sons in before Samuel, except for David, to look at and say, hey, maybe one of these can be king. And God says, I rejected them all. I look at the heart, not what outside appearances. And he finds David, and God says, that's my guy. He's a guy after my own heart. He will trust me. He will do what I want him to do. Was David perfect? No, but you can go read about that for yourself later on. But David had a heart after God. So Samuel anointed him, and in chapter 17, we see this story that maybe you've heard of before if you grew up in church. It's David and Goliath, the giant of the Philistines. And the giant of the Philistines walks out and he says, "Send me your best warrior." Now, in those days, you always sent out your best warrior because instead of two armies slaughtering each other, one would send out their best, the other one sent out their best. Whoever won, the other one would just submit to them. It's a great way not to lose people and resources. The biggest, tallest fighter for the Philistines was Goliath. He was this massive man, 8 to 10 feet tall, and was huge. The tallest, head and shoulders, guy in Israel, who should have been the one to fight Goliath, was Saul. And we find out in chapter 17 that Saul is terrified he doesn't want to die. So he's hiding in his tent. And David, this young guy, he's about 14 or 15, he comes in on behalf of his dad to feed his brothers at this fight. And he says, "What are you guys doing? That guy's defying God. Trust God. He said he would deliver us. Let's just do it." And Saul said, "No." The people said no. And David said, "If God is for us, basically, who can be against us? I will go fight him." What? You're the smallest dude, man. You're the youngest dude here, and you think you're going to beat him? And David said, "Yeah, not because I have it all together, but God's going to deliver." It's really cool. David talks about how as a shepherd, he's fought lions and bears and beat them with his bare hands. And if he can do that, then this guy will also be delivered in his hands. Whoa. That's amazing courage he has because he knows his affirmation comes from God, not from people. And you can read about what happens in chapter 17. Basically, God provides David the victory. He slays the giant, chops off his head, holds it up in front of all the people, and the Israelites won. Not because David was the strongest, not because David had it all together, but because David knew whose voice to listen to. David knew who to trust. And David sought approval for one person, and that was God. It wasn't his brothers, wasn't his dad, wasn't even the king of Israel's God. And you can see these two lives, and you can actually continue because it doesn't stop there. Throughout the rest of the book of 1 Samuel, you see Saul making more and more choices about people instead of God, and David making more and more choices to honor God and honor people like Saul because he honored God. It's an amazing thing, but we see after these two stories, one is about approving or appealing and going towards God. The other one's about appealing towards people. We said this on Sunday, and I want to ask you one more time before we end our talk today. Whose approval are you seeking? Because as a Christian, we're called to do things. It's to serve and to give and to live lives in obedient love and surrender to Jesus. But sometimes we can get in the habit of doing those things for the approval of others. People go, "Wow, isn't that person really cool?" And it's not about that. The only opinion that matters is God. So whose opinion are you living for? Would you pray with me? Father in heaven, we love you and adore you. We thank you for today, and we thank you for the stories from history that we can read from David and Saul. We want to be learners from them. We have a saying in America that those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. We want to learn from our history, from David and from Saul, of two different paths that people can take. One, looking for approval from people and how it always fails, it always crumbles. And one who took a path of the approval of God. Did he make mistakes? Yes. Was David's life messy? Yes. But he was still called a man after your own heart, and from his lineage came Jesus. May we be faithful and trusting you and seeking your approval only. Amen. Church, until we see each other again, you are sent. Have a great day.